All right, welcome to the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast. This is the PGA edition. I am your host, Brian Mears. We are joined, it is the week after the U.S. Open. It was an interesting one, to say the least. We are going to recap the U.S. Open and all the craziness. We're going to, of course, talk the Travelers Championship for this week. Pete, a.k.a. CSU Ram 88, is unable to join us this week, so it's just me and Colin holding down the fort. Colin, what's going on, man?
Yeah, this is awkward. Pete's lineups did so bad from the carnage at the U.S. Open that he was just vaporized on the spot, so we're going to be looking to find a replacement for him full-time. Yeah, that was an interesting weekend, to say the least. Brian, what were you saying the numbers are for how many people get 6 out of 6 across?
Yeah, so I believe I saw that 1% of Million Maker lineups had 6 of 6 make the cut, which is just a mind-blowing number, honestly.
I mean, I know we're liking being contrarian and all, but like sometimes,
Sure.
I mean, God, not that contrarian. It was kind of a mixed bag because I know that we were talking that our big fades were, Adam Scott and Thomas Peters, and that definitely worked well. The problem is everyone else was apparently also a fade. So
Right.
Ricky Fowler ended up being like he was the highest priced guy to make the cut, right?
Yep. Jordan made the cut.
Oh yeah, but didn't do anything.
Then flamed out after that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, and thank you guys for listening and joining us on the show. We really enjoyed the live show. But on that show, we talked about a lot of these things. Like we even said that, a potential contrarian strategy is to start with Brooks. Brooks Koepka, who's going to be potentially the lowest owned guy in like the 9K plus range. And we talked about that. So not that I want to be like we called Brooks was going to win. We definitely didn't do that. But, we did mention, I think I even asked you, Colin, I said, in such a loaded field, ownership is distributed. So how far do you have to go down the salary tier to find a guy who's going to have single digit ownership? And Brooks was the guy that we identified. So building a roster with him, we said it could be a contrarian move. We obviously didn't think that the carnage of the leaderboard was going to happen. DJ missed the cut, Rory missed the cut, Jason Day missed the cut, John Rahm missed the cut, Justin Rose missed the cut. I mean, the list goes on. Just absolutely brutal. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I don't know exactly what to take away, and this is probably going to be something that we're going to have to talk about over the next couple of weeks as these guys are sprinkled back into tournaments, just really what to do with just really awful play from some of these top guys.
Yeah, I'm looking at even this week for the Travelers, it's kind of fun to see the big three back at the same tournament, Rory, Jason, and Jordan. Yeah. But it's not the same big three. It's almost like a cover band type where it's like these are not the original people that I remember. And yet you're going to have to pick one of them because there's no like solid mid range, but we're getting way too far ahead of ourselves. So let's give this tournament a proper introduction before I just face palm and try to figure out what to do with these guys.
Sure. But quickly, just, any last thoughts on the U.S. Open? I mean, is there anything that game theory strategy-wise that we think? Obviously, like we are big proponents of be contrarian. We do this PGA Eagle lineup review. And we even got a cool thing from a user who said that he got off Rahm and pivoted to like Sergio and Brooks because of like we're just preaching contrarian, find the low-owned guys. I mean, we get to the point where like golf is just so volatile that like projections matter. Obviously, like long-term adjusted round matters, but it's almost matters more about just because it helps predict ownership. And ownership is like 90% of it now.
Yeah, I think I think you could. There's a case for being profitable in golf GPPs just looking at ownership alone, as long as you reach some salary floor and try to stay low owned. I don't think I've been saying that for a while. I don't think there's any reason for someone there's most cases. There's no reason for someone to be 25% owned in golf, and if they are, you avoid them, and that's that.
Yeah. I mean, there weren't that many high-owned guys in last week's tournament. I mean, Louis Oosthuizen was the highest-owned guy in the Million Maker at 25 points.
Did not see that.
Yeah, for sure. And then other guys that we did think, Adam Scott was right there at 24.9. So, we thought that would be the case for sure. But, yeah, I mean, you can make the case that a lot of these guys, all of the guys that were 20+% owned missed the cut. I mean, other than Matt Kuchar, who, ended up playing it pretty decent on the weekend, but really got to like Justin Thomas was really the only highly owned guy that ended up playing well. So yeah, I mean the meta game is important. We talk about it, but I think it's sort of becoming so important. Do you think that's just because like people are becoming so efficient with like stats and like just the DFS community is becoming efficient in identifying golfers that like, and I've seen this in baseball too, like. Like back in the early days of DFS, like there was definitely an edge in just like having better projections and understanding like who the best pitchers were and who the best golfers were. But now that like it's so efficient and everyone understands the most mispriced golfers, like everyone knows that Molinari isn't he's worth more than 7,000. Like it's just all about ownership, It's just because like, do you think it's because the market's so efficient now?
I mean, I think it is more efficient. I don't know if like when the next Ches Reavie pops up and just this massively underpriced 7K guy, I don't know that it'll be able to survive for like 10 weeks under the radar anymore. And I'm happy that there's so much more information about golf kind of circulating and people are taking interest in it. But yeah, I think it's more efficient than a year ago.
For sure.
That just means you have to adjust your ownership ranges because GPPs will never be solved. They'll at best reach Nash equilibrium in like a game theory type of instance, but I don't think we're nearly at the spot of like equilibrium.
Yeah, no, for sure, and I think that we'll continue to preach ownership and contrarian plays just because we really believe, and I think the U.S. Open was a good example of that. I don't think every week the contrarian play is going to win. Brooks Koepka's not going to win on a normal week, but it just does prove that even the best golfer in the world, whether it's DJ or Rory, whoever you think has less than 20% odds to win. That's just like nothing compared to like a heavy like Clayton Kershaw money line. So being contrarian in golf pays off, and high ownership should be faded. On that note, let's go to this week's tournament, the Travelers Championship. If you're a little confused about the timing, because it's June and they're playing the Travelers and they played it in August last year. If you remember last year, they moved it because of the Summer Olympics, but it's back here in June right after the U.S. Open now. It is at TPC River Highlands, which is a course in Connecticut. And we'll talk about that course just a little bit, but I think it's particularly interesting. It is a par 70, 6,800 yards, so literally 1,000 less yards than last week's Erin Hills tournament. So we go from one of the longer courses on the tour to quite a short one. Colin, I assume that accuracy over distance is probably going to be the play here.
I thought that too going in, where it's 6,800 yards. It's, way shorter than Erin Hills for sure. But a lot of the bombers are coming out as rating really well. You have your Tony Finau types, you have your Bubba Watson types, your Glovers, who are rating as a pretty strong course fit, which is weird to see in a 6,800-yard course. I don't know if there's a weather angle where it was rainy and so that disproportionately favored the bombers in some years, or if there's one thing kind of like, throwing it all off. But I'm going to probably be going for bombers over accuracy, guys, as weird as it sounds, in a 6,800-yard course.
Yeah, no, for sure. I sort of set you up there with that intro because, I mean, it is 6,800, so it's very much shorter than last year, or than last week's tournament, and just shorter in general, par 70, 6,800. But, I mean, like the Bombers have done really well with the most notorious one being Bubba Watson. If you just look at his last couple times here, 25th last year, first the year before, he has won twice here, 31st, 4th, 2nd, 38th, 1st. So, we can just talk about him real quick before we get to the top of the leaderboard here in terms of salary. But, we've talked about course history, course fit, and what qualifies as elite course history. We talked Jordan Spieth at Augusta. We've talked some other examples. How do you treat Bubba here?
Sorry, yeah. Bubba is a very interesting case because, what has he done? And yet he has elite course history. And this is kind of that, like, I don't know if it qualifies as, an elite is kind of a mutable definition. I actually don't even necessarily think he has the best course history, depending on what metric you use.
Sure.
But he's definitely, he's in, like, I'd say he's in a top 20 range in the field for probably the first time all year because, it's not the same Bubba. And his price does reflect that. It's just on the high enough on that weird, like, ownership nexus where people are truly off of him. I could see him, like, sneaking into a roster or two, but I think there's an outside chance that he's going to be the world's worst kept secret. And everyone's going to be like, everybody's going to out-level themselves this week where no one's on Bubba, and then, like, everybody picks Bubba, and, like, the play gets ruined. So I don't know how that'll shake out over the course of the week, but I'm guessing it'll end up being the latter rather than the former.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's stay on the course history angle just real quick, and then we can segue into the higher price guys because Jason Day, I think, qualifies for both. He does fit the course well. He has good history here, and he's high priced. But yeah, I'm curious, like him and a guy like Daniel Berger, who's only played the course once this year, or once total. He played it last year and came in fifth, played it really well. Seems to be a pretty good fit. He was playing really well leading up to the U.S. Open, and he's sort of in the same situation as Jason Day, and honestly, a lot of these top guys, and we'll transition to talking about him and Rory and some of these other guys. It's Colin, what are you doing with U.S. Open data? I mean, it's just Erin Hills is such a weird course with the distance, the fescue, the winds. I mean, everything was so weird about it. No one really knew that much going in. The players didn't know that much going in. Is it such an outlier course where, like, how are you dealing with such bad rounds from Day and Berger and Rory and stuff?
I mean, my approach is they count as bad rounds. And I think there is, and I talked about this briefly last time with DJ about how there's this tendency to fall back on a golfer's pedigree and just kind of like discount the bad rounds. And you can always find a reason to discount the bad rounds, right?
Yeah.
It's a new course. It was so-and-so. The only thing that I found you can reliably discount results based off of is wind. It had a standard amount of wind, and the windier it is, the more you discount it. The more you discount it.
But everyone had wind.
But right, exactly. So that's where you just that's where you do that, for flexing if you want to do a weighted average of long-term adjusted round, and you weight it by wind, the windier it is, the lower weight it gets. But there's no reason to not count these results. I think you're leaving yourself in a worse spot if you just arbitrarily throw out results than including them.
That's fair.
So as a result, I have Jason Day as pretty much unplayable this week.
Wow. Just
because it was such a bad miscut round. I mean, he was at the bottom of it. It's not just barely missing the cut; he really missed the cut.
Yeah.
Same thing with Daniel Berger, where he is actually maybe not as unplayable. But they're definitely guys at his price range that I strongly prefer. Although I think everybody's going to be thinking the same thing, and there are definitely going to be some chalky names. The other weird dynamic in this field, as I mentioned briefly earlier, is there's not a lot of upper middle class here in the price range.
Right.
It's the big three that are all above 11. And I think there's one guy who even has 10. That's Justin Thomas at 10-2. Yeah. There's no 10-5. There's no 10-8s. Normally you get a lot more of those. And so it'll be I really don't know what people are going to do. I think you're going to for a lot of people are going to have to roster one of the 11 guys. If I had to pick who it is, it's probably going to be Rory, just because Spieth can't get any ownership to save his life. So I think if we're going kind of contrarian and yet still maintain enough equity, I think that leaves Spieth as the play this week, who, like Rory, has never played this course and doesn't necessarily fit it all that well. But you have to play somebody and still keep ownership kind of downish.
Yeah, I mean, it really is tough to figure out, because you're right. There is a very interesting dynamic of the field. You know, you sort of just glance at first. You pull up salaries, and you say, okay, all right, this field is pretty solid. You know, we have Rory, Day, Spieth, JT at the top. We even have, you know, some interesting guys right below them, and, you know, Paul Casey, Berger. Steele is up at 9K fee now if you want to go distance. So, I mean, it's not like there's untalented golfers, but then you sort of go and get into the middle tier and then go a little bit lower. There's some definitely mispriced guys, but I would say it's pretty weak compared to what you first think when you look at the field. So, yeah, it's definitely interesting. I was going to ask you who you thought was going to be the highest owned guy here among the top guys, whether it's going to be Rory, Jason Day, or Jordan Spieth. And it's tough. If I'll play the Pete angle and say that, you know, I did watch Rory and Jason. I try to watch as much of the U.S. Open as possible, even though I had a lot of Rory, so it was pretty tilting to watch. Rory just sort of, you know, made a lot of dumb mistakes. Jason Day, they actually talked about, you know, it just sort of looked weird. Didn't look Jason Day. I don't really know what that means, like whether they think that his injury is still nagging. I didn't personally see that, but I think that with the round, with his data, where he's been, and then his price tag and what you said, just not playable, I think that I'm okay with being the fade. The guy that I'm curious where you think his ownership is going to be after just putting that amazing round. Obviously didn't finish well, but putting that 63 on Saturday, just absolutely destroying Aaron Hills. What are your thoughts on where JT is going to be ownership-wise?
I mean, up there for sure. I think he could feasibly crack top 5. I think especially since people are just going to, be super gun-shy off the top 3. I mean, the only thing is, I think, like, if people are looking for savings, people are going to strongly prefer Paul Casey at this point. I think he may have the highest ownership in the whole field. But I see, I see Justin Thomas as he'll be up there. People are going to want to go. Like, I look at everybody and him and everybody in the 9s, and I think people are going to go far more balanced this week, and it's just going to be between Steele, Casey, Thomas, and probably Leishman and maybe Finau. It's just everybody's going to have 3 of those guys.
I think JT and Paul Casey could be, especially JT. I think JT could have the highest. I don't know. I mean, there's some cheap guys like Ben On. We'll get to him in a second. That are just grossly mispriced. So we'll talk about that in a second. But I think that JT and Paul Casey, I think that's a good point. Paul Casey's just been so freaking consistent. I mean, just making cuts and just grinding out good finishes. I think they're going to be higher owned than Rory and Spieth. I really do.
Yeah, I could see that, absolutely.
Yeah. So so if you just want to go contrarian, I think that fading. I think that because how dramatic the U.S. Open was, and just in terms of people absolutely getting crushed by Aaron Hills, I think recency bias is always a thing. We always fade the winner. We always look who played well. Can we fade them because of an ownership bump? I think that's going to be extremely important this week. Just because of how gloriously Rory and Jason Day flamed out, I would say.
Glorious is a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Let's jump down to just the little bit lower tier. So, I mean, talking guys in the 8K range. And last week, Colin, there's not many guys. I mean, if you go up, Brennan Steele, Berger are right in that 9K, close to 8K range. And then you're looking at Finau. Bubba Watson is in that range, but I mean, there's not a lot of guys that really inspire a lot of confidence in this 8K range if you want to go super balanced.
I think Finau is going to be Finau, right? If people are in fact playing the bomber angle this week, he's popular always during bomber courses and also not during bomber courses for that matter. It's just Finau. He's a popular guy.
The other one that I'm interested in, and I don't like, the toughest one to get is going to be to predict is going to be Brian Harman, who had a fantastic showing at the U.S. Open.
Right.
People are going to be starved for a pick, and has history here to boot. I think he could be like, I would go over probably 15% on him. I think he'll be moderately chalky. And it's a viable pick. Him and Kyle Stanley kind of have a switch. Like Stanley doesn't have great history, but I think he sets up for this course really well. And Bubba is, I don't know. Yeah, he's going to be stealth recommendation. I don't know. It's kind of everybody's interesting in their own way here.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, that's the tough. Like Brian Harman at 8-9, you're really going to pay 8-9 for him at 15+% ownership. Like I don't think Brendan Steele is going to be lower. I mean, we're always fairly high on Brendan Steele, but I don't think he's going to be low owned. But like even getting up to like Leishman or Snedeker or Patrick Reed, I don't know. I think those are going to be low owned, but probably like Leishman, Snedeker might be a little bit lower owned, or down to Stanley, I think would probably be maybe lower owned because of his proximity to Finau and Harman. I think that's the play around that like high 8K range.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I still think people are just going to be stacking it with the nines.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's dip down to like the value range. People, we'll talk chalky guys that we think are going to be owned with, whoever may be, whether it's Casey, JT, or if people want to roll the dice with Spieth, Rory, day range. A lot of guys that are very low priced, sort of oddly. We talked about, I mentioned just a second ago, Ben On, he is at 7-1, and then other guys like in that range that are just like really mispriced, I think, compared to their talent. We talked about how well they fit the course. Grillo at 7-2, Hadwin 6-8. I think these are guys that are probably pretty popular just because of their talent. What are your thoughts on this range, guys you think are going to be popular?
You didn't mention my lock for the week for chalk, Charlie Hoffman, who just click on the course history, and that's going to be everything that everybody's talking about. Has odds that reflect. I mean, people really hone in on odds per dollar. That's kind of like there's one stop metric, and his are just phenomenally like high. I think he's going to be like easily the 7K chalk of the week. I think Grillo's going to be he's going to be up there. He's never played it. People might be a little bit off him from the U.S. Open, so maybe not as much as you think. I think Grillo and On are going to be really close in terms of ownership. I'm actually having a tough time figuring out who's going to like who more, especially since if people are going to balance more, they might not need some of these lower 7K guys as much. The one that I still hope just stays below the radar. Who has excellent course history here? Jez. It's Jez time. Yeah. It's Jez time. Just click on it. Take a look. It's bold don't lie. I think he sets up. I mean, it's distance is important here, yeah, but I think there's a ball striking angle here at a 6,800-yard course that could set up pretty well. Yeah. I'm going to be happy with it. He's going to be exactly in that mid-range where, it's great value. I don't know what to do with it. It's ownership. If it's above 10%, I can't justify it as much as I love it. I may just have to bump down to someone like Jamie Lovemark, who is high risk, high reward, never seems to crack 10% ownership. But I could definitely get there. The one that I'm almost surprised to see in this price range, and I feel like I missed a window, is Xander Schauffele, who had a great showing at the U.S. Open, and he was we had talked about him, and I think Trey Mullinax is kind of the other younger guys who are sneakily on everyone's radar. I think he'll solidly be on everyone's radar now. I feel like I missed a window. Why do you have to break out during the U.S. Open? But c'est la vie.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Yeah, I think that the window's probably closed. Getting in the top 10 in the U.S. Open there's something to be said for that, especially when all the top guys crash and burn. For sure. So that's probably true, which means that, probably fading them, going to some other guys, I think is going to be an interesting play. And another guy that I do like in this range, if we just go a little bit below the 7K range, is Lucas Glover at 6'6". That's just a really low price tag for someone of his talent. Seems to be a pretty good play here. So I'm curious, so if we think that, if like a guy like Charlie Hoffman is going to be like really highly owned, and Grillo at 7-1, like who are the guys that are like right around? Because one thing I did notice was, if you're just looking at ownership, like if we pull up the ownership dashboard from last week's U.S. Open, we go down to like some guy who is really, really chalky, like Molinari. So Molinari, he was 7,000, and he was 19% owned in the Millie Maker, one of the highest owned guys. And then if you look at the guys who are literally just right at his salary tier. So Charlie Hoffman, who we're talking about now, is right at 7K. He was 1% owned. Daniel Summerhay is 0.51% owned. Like even go up like Wiesberger Steele, under 10% owned. Gary Woodland, 3% owned. Russell Knox, 0.3% owned. Hadwin, 2. Like these guys that are like within 100 or 200 of the really chalky guy, I think is like almost the best leverage play in PGA right now. So if we think Charlie, Grillo, those guys are going to be chalky, what about like a guy like Martin Laird, who's literally the same price as Charlie Hoffman? Who are some guys that you think could be pivots? Because I think these are the guys that are going to be really valuable going on.
I think Martin Laird can't buy ownership, and there's nothing he can't do. I was pretty big on him last week because I thought he'd be under 1%, which he was. I never see him getting high ownership, and I'm happy to keep picking him for that exact reason. He hasn't hit like a high leverage payout yet, which will like maybe get him on people's radar yet, which is good because like I think he is like you never want to use the phrase like, oh, he's due. Like no one's ever due. But he has all the signs of like showing a great high leverage play for sure. John Ha is probably another interesting case here for, is it there enough here to go low owned? He'll be low owned for sure, but has awful history here. But that gets into like, is he the same player as before? Is his recent improvement enough to overcome that? I don't know. Other guys who we haven't talked about in a while are names like Jason Kokrak and Harold Varner. Varner's never played the course before, but both, and Kokrak has some decent like positive history. But I think both set up really well. I think they're going to be under 5%, and probably some of my favorite leverage plays. You could even go down to someone like Hudson Swafford, who is basically the same thing as Kokrak, except priced a lot higher. And I think people are going to get priced out of that, and that's going to keep his ownership nicely down and give you all the leverage that you need.
Yeah, that's a good call. So let's do something that I actually enjoy doing. I can't remember if we did it on the pod or the show, and maybe we can just incorporate this into shows from now on. Let's pick our favorite golfer, one that really intrigues us that we think will have like less than 4% ownership or something. So I'll start and let you, just so you can, because I was thinking about this, and let you find some guys. I think so. Kokrak was a good call. One guy that I think is going to be pretty low owned that I don't mind taking a stab at is Dirk McGirt, William McGirt at 7-1. He's in that same range. He's right at Grillo's price tag, right below Charlie Hoffman. So I think he's going to be pretty interesting. I do think he could be below 5% owned. So he's sort of an interesting like leverage play potentially. The Swafford call is pretty good. And then like I know that like we talked about Jonathan Vegas, and he really didn't work out. He has some missed cuts lately, but at 6'4" at like 2% ownership, I don't mind taking, like if you're making 100 lineups, I don't mind taking a stab at him either. What are your thoughts on a guy that might be like super low ownership leverage play in like the biggest tournaments that you could get some value on?
Depending on how much leverage you want, the one that's kind of like the other one that's a blank slate is Ryan Brehm at 6,500. Again, he doesn't have history in these places because he's definitely playing these courses a lot more. He's the type that has made a bunch of like cuts so far and never really like he's getting his higher numbers from just like basically having decent finishes but nothing spectacular. I think if I go off of my tenuous theory that like upside is not a measurable quantity in golf, or at least not as predictable as we think it is, that's good. And he's within range that he could make a top 10, and absolutely no one will be on him. So I'm still like, I mean, just by the law of large numbers, he eventually will. So it's not like I'll be like, oh, I was finally right or whatever. But
right.
I know that he will be under 5% for sure, probably under 3%. And like if you just want all the leverage in the world and are afraid of course history, I think he's your guy.
Perfect. Yeah, I like that call quite a bit. I mean, as mentioned at the top of the show, I mean, I think that projecting ownership in tournaments is like just really, really, really important right now. We saw, how huge it could be, if you hit on a low-owned guy, whether it's being on the early end of these young guys like Molinax or Xander, however you pronounce his name. Or even like pivoting down to a low-owned stud like Brooks or Ricky or whoever it may be. Projecting ownership and then using that in tournaments is really valuable. You can actually use ownership as a weighted metric in player models, so you can build it right into your model. So we'll continue to talk about this as time goes on. Obviously, really important. Cool. You want to pick some winners and get out of here?
Yep, that sounds good.
Cool. All right.
I guess we'll pick for Pete, and since he's not here, I think we'll just pick for him, and we'll do our best guess as far as what he would have picked.
Okay.
Be generous.
Sure.
All right. What order? Well, we're gonna have we'll have Pete go first.
Okay.
I think Pete would have really liked the Jason Day narrative, so he's gonna go with Jason Day for his winner. You can go next. Go ahead.
Jason Day is going to win this thing. It's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to go. Let's see here, man. I want to take JT just because of how well he's been playing, but I'm going to go. I'm going to go Rory.
Yeah, that is just the correct that's the correct play for sure. I'll go. I mean, we'll keep it boring and go. I'm gonna take JT. I'm gonna make that because
I like that.
The regret factor is gonna be way higher. All right, what's our cutoff for the last one?
Let's go under 9K, so you can't get steal.
That's the last thing I wanted to hear. All right, well, let me get my chalky play in now so I can fade him later. I'll go Charlie Hoffman.
Charlie, I like it. Comes back around to me. Cool. So, yeah, there's some interesting guys. Kyle Stanley, I think, is interesting at this range. Obviously, Bubba Watson is pretty high odds, even though I'm probably not going to go that route. I'm going to go Finau. Why not?
All right, and then that's a good call. And then Pete, I think, is going to be really up on the course history angle for the lower-owned guys. And there's some numbers that pop out at the low end. I think he really likes Stuart Appleby this week. So he is going to go – yeah, best course history in the field. I think he just like going to key in it. Like, this is going to happen. Yep.
Stuart Appleby. Wow, Pete is just light years ahead, like the Warriors.
Yeah. Oh no, he's galaxy brain, just leveling us like across the board.
Good stuff, Pete. All right. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. As always, man. I mean, it's going to happen. Appleby and who was this pick?
Jason Day.
Yeah, Appleby and Jason Day.
Neck and Sunday.
1 and 2. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Final pairing. All right. Thanks, you guys, for joining us. Hopefully, you had some success at the US Open, but we're not done grinding. We got 2 more majors this year. One next month and one in August. British Open, PGA Championship. So we're grinding away this summer. Excited to play some PGA DFS. Excited to talk about it. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you guys next week.